Is Kimi Antonelli ready for F1? This is the Italian season in F2 so far. Starting over in Sakhir, Bahrain, with round 1 where the Italian qualified in a disappointing P17. His lap was close to a second off the pole man of Bortoleto, but most people gave him the benefit of the doubt, with him skipping the more conventional route of F3 to F2 in exchange for a straight jump into F2. The sprint race, his fortunes remained relatively similar, with only a P14. This first weekend at Sakhir was so heavily criticized for no reason at all. I mean, the poor kid didn't even get time to breathe before they started calling him overrated, with a P10 and a singular point being his reward for his efforts in round 1. Not much to talk about, but he was mostly overshadowed by Zane Maloney, someone who won both races that weekend and still isn't being talked about by anyone in the F1 circle. It just goes to show how much talent is left out. For now, the streets of Saudi Arabia began with a much better performance for the young Italian, with him picking up a very nice 6th place, just over 2/10 from pole. This weekend quali was made even better when Oliver Bearman was called up to Ferrari to replace Carlos Sainz, who was out due to an appendix surgery. Remember, the first 10 in F2 was switched, which meant that Antonelli was changed from a P5 to a P6, where he would finish the race. This weekend really demonstrated his consistency to teams, as they took notice of his reliability behind the wheel, finishing in P6 again, which meant he finished with a total of 11 points from the weekend. A massive improvement from the first weekend, and showing everyone a lot of positive signs. However, they were mostly overshadowed by Bearman's performance in the Ferrari this weekend. The third round in Melbourne would be a fantastic opportunity to show what he can do, with this being the last thing on people's minds before the 1.5-month break. A super important event for his future prospects, and he did not disappoint early on, with him pushing his Prema to a front row slot, with this meaning a P9 start for the sprint. Here is what happens during the sprint race in Australia, P11. P5 at this point for Antonelli until lap 10, where during a car collision and 0 points in the sprint that looked so promising. This incident here was talked about by everyone in the F1 circle, with many being quick to call out his rookie error when presented with the chance to win or at least podium, with inexperience being the culprit for this strange spin. However, he would have a second chance at points during the feature race, starting from a 2nd place on Sunday. He looked very impressive during the race, with him staying within a second of the man in first. It was an unfortunate incident in terms of timing for Antonelli, who had just boxed along with half the field before the virtual safety car was called out. This meant that the cars in front were allowed a free pit stop, dropping the Italian from P2 to P8. However, he could recover back to P4 to make something of the day, taking a total of 12 points, still an improvement from the 11 points last time around. After a month and a half off from F2, and Antonelli talked about even more, now as Hamilton's replacement on his name, he headed to Imola where Antonelli continued his good form, especially in qualifying, taking his 2nd row slot in P4 or P7 for the sprint. This meant that he started on the inside line, which helped him avoid as much as he could from the massive first lap incident that saw all cars down from P6 onwards being affected, with the first 5 cars that were reversed, thanks to the Formula 2 rules being the biggest winners. Kimi, after this, was all the way down in P12, where he could only later improve to a P11 and P10, missing out on the points positions of the top 8 during the sprint. Just like an exact replica of Australia, he would have his sprint race affected by an incident, this time of no fault of his own, before having a second attempt at it on Sunday for the sprint, where he would take the car home, finishing where he started in 4th and taking another 12 points from the weekend. His consistency at this point taking him back into the top 10 in the standings after falling out temporarily. Finally, we arrived to the most recent race of Monte Carlo, where qualifying is all important. The unique Group A and Group B qualifying meant that the Italian finished 4th in his group and 7th overall. A little disappointing, but he would still start 4th in the sprint race. Despite multiple incidents, the leading 4 were largely unaffected. Where there were some important points was towards the championship standings, where Maloney had a very rough race, with multiple incidents and a final crash at La Rascasse on lap 24. The feature race on the other hand had some really close action, with this amazing sequence of corners holding a battle that led to Antonelli losing a position to Behrman. Behrman himself has had a very underwhelming season, with his biggest highlight coming in F1, but he did too well in this race. These two are of course teammates, but bound to very different academies. Kimi got by Colapinto on lap 38 in the first sector, but ended up in P7 in the end, racking up 6 points once again and 12 points on the weekend. So what can be said of Antonelli so far this year? Is he worth the hype? Well, while it's only been 5 rounds into the season, the Italian has had a glimpse of what he can do, with front row starts and top 4 finishes twice. He's been unlucky with certain incidents throughout the season so far. We feel that he could be sent into F1, but it wouldn't be a good decision just yet. It seems like we may get a few practice sessions later in the year with him at the wheel, but this year of development in F2, especially in racecraft, will help him massively. Sending him into Mercedes straight away is such a risky strategy and gamble that could destroy his career or set him up for the future. For Mercedes though, it seems like they don't really have another option they like. The fact is, Lewis Hamilton is leaving the team at the end of the year, and time is running out to make that decision.